Today's Bible verses are from the Gospel according to St. Luke, chapter 16, verses 1 to 13. And he spoke a parable to his disciples, saying, There was a rich man who had a steward, and they accused him that he was wasting his wealth. So his master called him and said to him, What is this that I hear concerning you? Give me an account of your stewardship, for no longer can you be a steward for me. Then the steward said to himself, What will I do? For my Lord will take away from me the stewardship. I cannot dig, and I am ashamed to beg. Now I know what I will do, so that when I leave the stewardship, they will receive me in their houses. And he called his Lord's debtors, one by one, and said to the first, How much do you owe my Lord? He said to him, 100 measures of butter. He said to him, Take your note, sit down quickly, and write 50 pounds. And he said to another, And you, what do you owe my Lord? He said to him, 100 bushels of wheat. He said to him, Take your note, sit down, and write 80 bushels. And the Lord praised the unjust steward because he had done wisely. For the children of this world are wiser in their generation than the children of light. And I also say to you, use this earthly wealth, however acquired, to make friends, so that when it is gone, they will receive you, and you will have everlasting habitation. He who is faithful with little is also faithful with much. And he who is dishonest with little is also dishonest with much. If, therefore, you are not faithful with the wealth of iniquity, who will believe that there is any truth in you? And if you are not found faithful with that which is not your own, who will give you that which is your own? No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and like the other, or he will honor one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon, or wealth. And so ends the reading for today. And now Dr. Lyle will give us our lesson sermon.
Okay, before we start all of that, I'm sure you all know that Paul Newman made his transition yesterday, so I think we all need to just take a moment and have a moment of silence and honor that, and maybe we'll do something a little more formal next week. But of one of the things that I did note, as successful as he was, he's at least according to the news reports, he contributed over $175 million to charity. And most of us are so concerned about money, we're trying to figure out how to just get 1 million of it set aside. And he managed to share 175 million. So consider his, what I would call a rather abundant consciousness in that area. And so as we have this moment of silence for him, let's see him in the best light that we are able to. Okay, thank you. Last week we spent some time discussing upgrading our thought pattern. And spent some time with the idea that in general, we all want to progress, we all want to grow, and we hold the best thoughts that we can. And the emphasis last week was on the idea that no matter how good the thought is, no matter how perfect the thought is, at least at this point of our existence and the way that we look at it, it can always be improved upon. And many times our thought patterns are of such a nature that it takes years for us to understand that there is a better way of looking at a situation. Even though the way we were looking at it might have been quite good or quite adequate, there's still a higher level. And I think for us, we tend a great deal of the time to want to try and fix something and then view it as permanent, something we don't have to re-look at again, that this is now the highest and best state of whatever that is. And yet we know throughout history, as we look at all of the things that mankind has built, that it may be years later and years down the line, but there always comes a time for some sort of upgrading. Certainly there was a time that we went from one form of pipe to another, and went from 20 years, 30 years lifespan to 50 years lifespan. And the idea of it is that there's some point in time, there's always a necessity to renovate, and there's progress always going on. And that newer and better products, newer and better ideas become available. And it's the same in our own mentality. When we really have to understand that process, that there is the concept of growth and progression, regardless of how well we look at something and how much better a thought pattern one person may have over another in a given situation. Regardless of that circumstance, there's always room for improvement. And I think it's difficult for us many times to accept that and to work that out in our heads. We have to be willing to constantly be open for renewal and change. We have to be willing to be constantly open to expand and to grow. And it seems most of our life, or a great deal of our life, is spent trying to hang on to or create a situation that lends itself to some sort of permanent basis. And in fact, we shouldn't be looking at it that way. So with that kind of as a background, it's interesting. We had a scripture this morning, and it was about a steward who all of a sudden it seemed to be that he got elevated in his position, or he was given more responsibilities. And so what was interesting, once he was given more responsibility, what happened to him is he, for whatever reason, started exuding a certain amount of generosity. Now, the scripture seems to indicate that that maybe wasn't so generous because he was padding his future, so to speak. He had a group of people that were under him that owed certain things, and he reduced their bills so that they all would think kindly of him. So if something befell him in the future, or as things went down, then his future was provided for, because his thought process was, as he was kind to them, they would be kind to him. Very, very similar to the Golden Rule. And in this particular scripture, it was being used as an example by Jesus, but he was saying the guy was wise.